In our last unit, Ms. Jacobs and I made the claim that modern history really began when the old order fell apart. You know all that right now, right? But this slide offers a quick review. Stasis is actually a Greek word that means standing still. It's the root for the English word static. Synthesis is also Greek. It means putting things together. In the medieval worldview, everyone had a fixed place in harmony and for mutual benefit. Now, it didn't always work out that way in practice, just ask Wat Tyler. But once the Renaissance began, even the underlying theory came under challenge. So let me describe this city to you, the one pictured here. In 1328, the city's population was about 200,000, making it the largest city in Europe. It was the political, economic, religious, and cultural capital of Europe's most populous and powerful country. It was home to Europe's most famous university, where the Italian scholar and St. Thomas Aquinas first studied and then taught. So, what city am I talking about? Actually, I was describing medieval Paris, arguably the cultural and intellectual heart of medieval Europe. So why did the rebirth of Europe, that's what Renaissance means, begin not here, but in Florence, Italy, or in the northern city-states of Italy? I'm going to get to Italy in a moment, but let me just note the change usually does not begin where power, authority, and tradition are most established. Companies that build horse-drawn carriages, for example, did not go on to invent automobiles. It's a fascinating question why some individuals, some cultures, some countries prove more open to innovation and new ideas than others. I hope we can return to that, but for now, on to Renaissance Italy. So why was it Mama Italy, not Mama France, that gave rebirth to Europe? One answer is that Italy's geographic location, jutting out into the Mediterranean Sea, made it a center of trade with the East, with the Muslim empires in what is now Turkey and Spain, and with Europe. In other words, Italy was a place where ideas came together as well as goods and people. It's worth noting, by the way, that at this point in history, the Muslim countries were especially advanced in mathematics and science. As well, by the way, as philosophy. So this contact definitely benefited the Italians. In fact, many of the classical texts that became so influential in the Renaissance actually came from Arab sources, were translated from Greek and Arabic and then into Latin. Also, when Constantinople fell, Italy was the closest European country where Christians could take refuge, including Orthodox Christian scholars who brought Greek texts to Italy. Italy's seaports and central location also made it easier for ideas from Italy to spread to the rest of Europe. Generally speaking, at this time and for centuries to come, travel by ship was faster and more reliable than travel by land. This wouldn't really change until railroads appeared in the 19th century. A big part of the Renaissance was the so-called recovery of the culture of ancient Greece and Rome. But in Italy, the classical world had never really been entirely lost. People in Italy lived every day with the artifacts of ancient Rome, so they didn't need as much reminding. Italy also did not need all that much excuse to turn away from the barbarians. Remember, the French used to be called the Gauls, and Julius Caesar defeated them. This way they could return to their own proud roots. Northern Italy in particular was much more urban than the rest of Europe, and its economy was based less on agriculture than on trade. If you think about it, peoples whose lives center around agriculture are more tied to a place. They tend to be more conservative. Trade breeds contact with other people, with new ideas, and it creates more of an outward focus and an openness to change. Trade also gave political power to the wealthy merchant class, a group that proved especially open to new ideas and especially willing to invest their growing wealth. The plague hit northern Italy especially hard. 60% of the people in Florence died, for example. But this also, as we talked about in our last unit, gave more power to ordinary people. And the politics of reaching out to and appealing to the ordinary people was, in fact, part of the Renaissance. Your reading is going to talk more about this. The merchant classes not only gained money from trade, many members of these families also inherited from relatives who died in the plague. This actually led to an important concentration of wealth. And people were basically looking for ways to spend their money. And one of their choices was investment in art, in architecture, and literature. These were goods that not only, of course, gave pleasure to the senses, but also, and again, your reading will talk about, added to the political prestige. So there was an incentive to invest in art, architecture, literature, but that was very important for the onset of the Renaissance. This short video clip talks about how the plague actually helped usher in the Renaissance. We've been talking about broad trends in history, but we hope you don't ever forget that individuals matter as well. So sure, the use of longbows and cannons at Crécy helped change history. But that really only happened because Edward III, the King of England and the commander on the battlefield, was an innovative, flexible leader who was willing to use his common soldiers in a new way, somebody who was willing to depart from the traditional feudal military and political order. Likewise, sure, Italy's merchant leaders were more open to new ideas. It kind of went with their profession and with the territory. But it's also true that a major reason why the Renaissance began in Florence was that Cosimo de' Medici and his successors, especially his son Lorenzo, lived and ruled there. Tomorrow you'll be studying one of the most famous passages by the Italian thinker Machiavelli. So I thought I'd share this quote. These are Machiavelli's observations about Cosimo de' Medici, by the way, a political opponent of Machiavelli's in the complicated politics of Florence. But note the adjectives that Machiavelli uses: prudent, liberal, humane, bountiful, generous. This was the spirit that helped give rise to the Renaissance. This is a famous Renaissance painting by Botticelli showing the Medici family as the wise men visiting Jesus. Cosimo is the figure kneeling in front of the Virgin Mary. This helps make an important point. Renaissance leaders, thinkers, and artists all admired ancient Greece and Rome and often are described as humanists, which means that they placed great importance on the talent and potential of human beings. They were not just God-focused. But don't misunderstand this. This was a profoundly Christian era. These people were not pagans. They may have been attracted by Greek and Roman art. They were not really especially attracted by Greek and Roman religion. So let's turn now to a video clip about the Medici family and their involvement in one of the most famous artistic projects of the Renaissance. You probably are not going to have time to get to this before the reading and the quiz, but here is a great clip about how Brunelleschi, with the backing from the Medici, finally solved the great problem of erecting a dome on the Florence Cathedral. If you finish your quiz in time, this would be a great thing to look at.